Welcome, friends. Whether you're out on a walk, running errands, or relaxing at home, it is wonderful to connect with you. Joining us today is Chris Shurian. Over 39 years, Chris has, listen to this, built, operated, bought, broken, and resurrected companies in remodeling, construction, manufacturing, real estate development, foreign investment, hospitality, restaurants, and retail.
Wow, that's
So
impressive.
Chris says, and this is gonna be great. Chris says, I won big, lost big, survived cancer, finished 2 Ironmans, and I still show up with the enthusiasm of a guy launching his very first venture. Chris, welcome to Phoenix in Flame.
Thanks, Dana. I love the introduction. That's me. I wrote it. It's my bio. So yeah, that was awesome. I like you read it with enthusiasm. I really appreciate that.
Well, I think we need to stop and really recognize what we're reading, what is going on, because I'm interested in the life story behind the words.
Yeah.
And so that explains so much. And there's even more to talk about, but let's just that is so much to say. You've built, operated, bought, broken, resurrected companies. Wow. So where do you want to begin? I'm just going to kind of give you some grace and you can pick wherever you would like
Yeah.
to start talking about your life journey, and we'll weave together back and forth to collect all the pieces so that my listeners and my viewers can really get a really good feel for you, Chris, and what that journey was like.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I probably have to start with explaining that, a lot of people say they're serial entrepreneurs, right? Or lifelong entrepreneurs. Well, I coined this term. I don't think I made it up, but I coined the term entrepeholic. I'm a literal entrepeholic. And
I've never heard that before. I love
yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah. And so anyone who's an entrepreneur is probably sitting there going, "Oh yeah, I know exactly what that is, right?" And I've always I've worked for myself for a long, in the 39 years I've been providing for me and my family. I've only worked of those 39 years, 4 years for other people, right? And then at some point you have an entrepreneurial seizure, like Michael Gerber used to say, and you feel like, oh, I can do it myself. I can do it better. And so, but the challenge comes with, for me, it's doing one thing, getting good at it, and then all of a sudden there's an opportunity that pops up. And in the beginning, that opportunity was something that worked well with what I was doing. So I'm like, well, let's do this. And then all of a sudden another opportunity, let's do this. And at one point in 2002, 2008 ish, I had 4 companies that we were running. I had 50 employees, which, that's not big, but for me, it was pretty accomplished. I felt accomplished. I was having success, and we're doing pretty good. But that's when the old, little economic recession hit, and there's a story there. There's a story there. But yeah. So being an entrepreneur or a serial entrepreneur is just that's how I end up in these places, right? I see an opportunity. I think I'm pretty smart. I think I can go make it happen, and I go after it. And it's been fun. And then even, well, I mean, how deep do you want me to get into our little, for example, this 08, 09 experience I had? I don't know if you want me to roll into that or if you want to, dig a little deeper, but
Well, I already have questions. So,
you have questions. Oh,
yes, I already have questions because I'm putting myself in the role of my listeners and viewers, and I'm thinking if there's someone that would really like to be an entrepreneur. They feel it in their soul, they feel it in their gut, but they're scared
yeah.
because it takes courage, it takes guts, it takes grit, it takes all kinds of things to be an entrepreneur. Number 1, what did it feel like for you?
Hmm.
Truthfully, honestly, how did it feel like to try to be the good, the bad, the ugly, to launch out into that space where sometimes it feels like jumping off a cliff and figuring out the parachute on the way down?
Yeah.
Uh-huh. And
That's
so how did that what were all the things you were feeling? And what are any kind of words of wisdom or encouragement you might share with someone who feels that they want to do that, but they are scared to death?
Yeah, I've done it. I've done it several times, right? And depending on the phase of life you're in, it's a different experience. So the first time I did it, I was young married, you know, renting, didn't have a lot of overhead, didn't have a lot of bills to pay. And so when I quit my job and decided to go into construction on my own, it was a little bit, even though it was scary, it was super scary. Um, my monthly obligations were pretty minimal and I didn't know any better. So you kind of go into it like, whatever. But I also knew, and my wife also had confidence in the fact that I was a hard worker, and no matter what, I could hustle and I could make things happen. And I wasn't, I could just go do whatever I needed to do to make money. My very first truck that I used for my company, this is probably 40 years ago. My uncle had this old Ford truck, and we used to help my uncle out around his property a lot. And I remember he called me up and found out I was doing my own thing, and he asked me if I'd do some work for him, and I said, "Great. In fact, I'll trade you for that old truck." 'Cause I didn't even have a work truck at the time. And so, knowing that I was a hard worker, I could hustle. I was the kind of guy that just made things happen, and I never said no to anything. I mean, if I was, for example, at the time I was working for an excavation contractor doing real estate development, doing all the utility work and doing some landscaping, and that's what I was doing. But if someone said, "Hey, can you come build a closet for me in my house?" Sure, let's do it. I'd figure it out. I'd go, I mean, and we didn't have YouTube University back then, Dana. It was like,
Right.
it was go find a book and figure this stuff out. And so, and then I had a neighbor that said, "Hey, I live in a condominium association and they're making us replace all of the fences around our little backyard. So can you come over on the weekend and help me do that?" And I thought, sure, let's do it. So I went over and we tore down his fence and built a new fence. And next thing you know it, all the neighbors are coming up and saying, "Hey, can you build my fence? Because I have to do my fence too." So then all of a sudden I became this really kick-ass, sorry, pardon the language, fence builder. And I learned how to build fences. I learned how to do it quick. I could build a fence, I could tear it down, build it, and walk off the job in one day. And so, so in the beginning, it was like I didn't know any better. My monthly commitment, my obligation was little, and I just knew I could hustle and make it happen, right? But then later in life, when I did it again, it's like, okay, now I've got a family, I've got a home, I've got obligations, I've got truck payments and mortgage payments, and I got these things. Well, then it's a little bit different. And then you're starting a business that's a little more specific to what you're doing, whether it's a restaurant or, doing a new real estate development or working on foreign investment. That's a whole different beast, right? It's a whole different obligation. So the fear is different. But still, it all comes down to I had confidence in my ability to make it happen. I knew that I was going to be able to pay the bills. I knew that somehow that money would show up, that I could support my family. And so for me, it was all about this mindset thing, right? It's all about, knowing you can do it, having confidence in your ability, and just knowing I was going into an area where I controlled it and things would work out. And they always did.
I love that, just really honoring how you feel about yourself and like I said, your frame of mind was huge. Um, I also heard a couple of things, but I wanted to bounce over to the facing adversity, like when you're talking about when the economy tanked and,
Yeah.
because you talked about, broken, resurrected, so I want to know the whole thing. But what I also heard you say for people who were starting out, um, it's, bartering, like, if you don't have cash for something, you can barter, like, it doesn't matter if you don't have cash money, you have other things, you have other talents, other skills you can use to trade, and also getting it out there when you were doing the fencing, you were doing if people get out there and do what they're good at, what they can do, and other people see it, then that's gonna grow, then other people are gonna go, "Oh my gosh, that's could you do that for me? Could you do that? I like that." And so, whatever it is that an entrepreneur is doing, do it and do it well, and get it out there where other people can see. And I think to your point, when you're working with different businesses, the the visualization is different. The marketing is different. If you're building a fence, you're right out there for everybody to see.
Hmm.
If it's something in the financial world, that's a bit different in terms
Yeah.
of being able to get your ability out there for people to see. So share with what happened when you were when the economy went down and everything
Mhm.
was going and then it wasn't.
Yeah. Yeah. Uh, so in '07, '08, we were doing pretty well. I was a general contractor. We specialized in high-end custom remodeling. We really focused on remodeling. When I got into construction and remodeling specifically, which I enjoyed, I felt like if I could bring a level of professionalism to an industry that had a reputation as not being professional, that I'd have something, right? So
Mhm.
I would answer phone calls, I would return phone calls, I would show up on time. On the job site, I would clean up. I mean, people were astonished when I'd call them 5 minutes before my appointment and say, "Hey, I'm running a couple minutes late." They would like I could hear this silence on the other end, like, "Well, you're a contractor. I figured you'd be late." You know what I mean? And I mean, yeah, so I figured if I could bring a level of professionalism into the remodeling world, I'd have an advantage, and it worked, and it grew, and I had so much business, and, we won awards. We were the Utah State Remodeler of the Year. We were the Western Region Remodeler of the Year. I mean, we really had great success and built that. And then I had people that approached me that wanted me to build them homes because they knew I was really good at remodeling. So then we started a custom home division and started building beautiful custom homes, multi-million dollar homes for people. And then I thought, well, we do a lot of cabinet work. So let's open a cabinet shop. So we opened up and built this really, really awesome manufacturing facility. We built super high-end custom cabinets. We called it custom furniture because it was really nice work. In fact, we ended up building cabinets for contractors in California and Washington State and Oregon. I mean, we were doing some very high end work. And then, another opportunity, we did a lot of electrical work. And one of my key employees, his brother in law was an electrician. And I thought, well, why not? Let's bring our electrician in. Let's start our own electrical company. We can do our own electrical work. We can do service work for all of our past customers. So it was really a great model, and we were doing really well. And during that time, I was also doing some real estate development. So I don't know if you remember back then, and especially in this area. I mean, I could buy a piece of raw dirt today, and tomorrow someone would offer me double the price. It was ridiculous. I mean, it was in that moment where it wasn't sustainable, right? So I'm buying land, I'm doing little residential neighborhoods. I mean, I'm really doing a lot of things. And so, I built a spec home that in 2007, late 2007, which was, I built a home because I knew I could sell it. Well, when the economy crashed, I was pretty extended. I had bought land, I had built a spec home, I was doing a huge remodel on my own personal home, and I was just out there. And I'll tell you, part of this is I'm very optimistic and I'm very persistent. And so, so when I see you're
I'm
laughing,
picking that up about you, Chris.
yeah, yeah, you know where this is headed, but um, I mean, I am so persistent that I have persisted myself into some pretty deep corners that I've had a hard time getting out of. But when I hear grumblings of the economy and things getting kind of weird, what's my mind say? It doesn't say, "Ooh, tap the brakes." My mind says, "Great, let's go. Let's keep going. Let's keep going." And so when the economy crashed, um, now don't get me wrong, I did a lot of things right that helped me survive that. But I also was super out there. I leveraged everything. And so, next thing you know what, I spent the next 2 years, you know, probably once a week with my banker, talking about how we're going to get out of some of these little pickles. I sold the cabinet shop. I closed, um, well, I sold the electrical company. And then the construction company, which was the remodeling and the new construction, I basically called my general manager and superintendent and said, "Hey, we're in survival mode. You guys just take this and go provide for your family." And so I was fortunate in that way. But when you just bought a couple $1 million worth of land and you're supposed to build homes on it, and homes aren't selling, no one's buying anything, that hurt. The bank was very interested in that. And then you build a multi-million dollar spec home, and you get a construction loan to do that. All of a sudden the bank's like, "Well, Chris, your house isn't selling. What are you gonna do now?" So it was pretty exciting. It was pretty exciting. But yeah. So, so you know, I know you're
Pause.
I know
We're
you're
gonna we're gonna
laughing with
pause
me,
right
right?
here
You're
because
laughing with me, right, Dana? You're laughing with
yes,
me. Yeah, not laughing. Yeah, I
what
appreciate
I'm
that.
laughing about
Yeah.
is actually is about neuroplasticity
Oh,
because
yeah.
what someone else might interpret as scary, you define as exciting. And I wanted to bring that up because that has a big deal with how we perform in the world, how we experience the world.
Mhm.
And so they did a research experiment where somebody would go and to try to do, like, karaoke, and it scared her to death. She was in a psychology course. She went down the road near her college and liked to go to the karaoke bar, but it terrified her, right?
Mhm.
Well, they were trying to do an experiment, and they learned that how fear and nervousness is so similar to excitement in our body. And so with neuroplasticity, what the theory of that is that if you can redefine it as excitement and tell yourself, I'm excited rather than I'm freaking scared to death, then your brain will shift and you will have a different outlook on it. It's the whole neuroplasticity thing is amazing. And so I had to laugh because that's what I heard you doing in practical example is another situation that someone else would have been, like, terrified. You use the word excited.
I mean, that's how I think. It's silly, huh? It's funny. Yeah. Yeah,
But
yeah.
it's good. I mean, it's a very positive thing.
Well, and I think it's, early on when I first started, adulting and I had different jobs and I worked in certain I did sales, and man, I couldn't I was always tracking down, like positive, okay, cassette tapes, Dana, you might remember what those are.
I
I mean,
do.
I had, like, the Tony Robbins, 30 Days to Power, whatever that thing was. I would listen to those every day. Zig Ziglar, I mean, I can still remember his voice in my mind. I mean, I was always just feeding my mind with positivity, because being in sales, I mean, it was like door to door almost. And I was cold calling. I mean, every night I'd get this book about this thick full of phone numbers and I would just call people. Right. And, that's a hard thing to do. So
Mhm.
I programmed my mind to I fed it full of this propaganda of, you can do whatever you want to do and whatever your mind can believe and conceive it can achieve. I mean, I just fed my mind like that. So yeah, when I came to that point where things were falling apart, probably the biggest blow to my ego was that I'd built something cool. We were very visible. Like I said, I was very recognizable in my community because of a lot of other things we did. We gave back a lot to the community. I got a lot of press. I had a lot of great PR. And so for me to be failing in my business was crushing to my ego, as you can imagine.
Mhm.
Financially, I did a lot of things right. I made money and I bought things. I had a houseboat on Lake Powell. I had a boat. I had classic cars. I had a cabin in the mountains. But fortunately, I paid cash for those items. So when I was when I needed money to provide for my family, I could sell my boat for half price and I had cash. My friends were selling their boats trying to pay off the bank and they couldn't sell them to get the bank paid off. But I fortunately, uh, a life lesson for entrepreneurs, but the fact that I paid cash for the toys helped me tremendously. I mean, it was sad to see the boat get pulled down the road. It was sad to see, the Corvette get loaded on a flatbed and shipped to, I think, the guy in maybe North Carolina bought my Corvette. So, but the fact that I'd had that as like a savings account, like that rainy day fund, saved my bacon and gave me time to figure out what was next after I had those exits. So I was very fortunate that way.
So, Chris, you sound like you make a lot of really good financial choices. You have an excellent, a very, very nice business mind, and you've made choices, and you're such a hard worker, and you're out there, and you're busting your hump and doing all the things. You're someone that someone is going to look at from the outside and go, "Well, he's just got it all, right?
Yeah.
He's got the boats and the Corvettes and the big houses and the this and that." And one of the things that I love to do on Phoenix and Flame is how we can connect with one another. And we could say, we're much more alike than you realize. And so I'm kind of wondering from your experience of going through these things. And one of the things we talk about on Phoenix and Flame is, what was the fire that burnt you to the ground? What is something that you experienced in terms of, being transparent, um, about your journey, about what was, because it sounds like financially you're just on fire, right? You're really good at that kind of thing. Um, but we all know life journey is interesting. It takes some twists and turns.
Yeah. And, that's funny, Dana, because, I look at myself in the mirror and I think I suck at things like that. I look at businesses, for example, like I beat myself up a little bit. I can look back. Now I don't live in regret. I have this really great blessed, I have this ability to not live in regret. I look at everything that happened to me in the past as part of who I am, and I like who I am, and and here I am. So I don't look at regret at all, but I can certainly look back and say, okay, had I done this different, there would have been a different outcome. And it usually, believe it or not, revolves around finances. I mean, even though I did some things right, like I paid cash for my boat, I paid cash for this, you know, I was making a lot of money and I wasn't really thinking for the future. Like if I was to go back, I would say I could have taken a lot of money. I could have slowed my roll a little bit. I could have turned down the volume just a little bit and I could have put more money away to plan for a rainy day, right? But for me in my mind was like just all in, all in, all in. So yeah, you say that and I laugh because it's funny because I don't feel that way about myself. Um uh but I've done a lot of things right. So I have done that. And sometimes, here I am, I coach business owners now. Like this, from all my experience, I had a little exit last year. I sold our restaurants and actually walked away with money in my pocket. Not a lot, but it was a successful exit. And now I coach. And so for me, sometimes I look in the mirror and I have this imposter syndrome, right? I look at me like, oh, who am I to be coaching these people that are probably even more successful than I am or ever was? But the fact of all my experiences, it's amazing how I've done and been involved in a lot of different things. And no matter what the industry, if I'm sitting across the table from some business owner, entrepreneur, founder who's having some challenges, I can see things differently. And I see things that maybe they can't see. And so I really do have great value to add. And I have to convince myself that, you know what, I do add value. Like I'll get off the phone with some of my clients and be like, wow, that was pretty good. I could see them taking notes. I can see their eyes going, lighting up like, yeah, yeah, that's a good idea. So it's an interesting dichotomy of sorts. There's a big word right there. I mean, I have no right using big words like that. I must have heard that word somewhere on one of your podcasts. But
Oh, very funny, Chris. Oh, so I've got another question for you.
okay. And I didn't
Y-
really answer your last question, but let's see if I can answer the next one.
Well, you're not wrong, but I think as I'm listening to you answer, and I'm hearing what you're saying, because I also deal with a lot of high performers,
Hmm.
which you would fit into that category, and you coach people who fit into that category. And if you think of high performers and also the role of boundaries, because as human beings, even someone who has a lot of energy, we can only, one individual, there's only 24 hours in the day, and we only have so much energy. And what I've learned, people that are high performers, I'm one of them, you're one of them, we deal with other people like that. We draw people to us like moth to light. That's just gonna happen because you get out there and you're good at what you do, you're excited about what you do, and other people want a part. They want, "I want you to be on this project. I want you to lead this. I want you to be the president of this. I want you to take over this. Would you do this for me?" And so if high flyers aren't able to practice boundaries along the way, they're gonna be like Icarus flying too close to the sun. Sooner or later, it's gonna happen, and all their wings are gonna melt off, and they're gonna go plummeting to the ground. And so my question to you is, maybe from personal experience or even somebody that you've talked to, is where do you see the need for boundaries, or where have you run into a personal experience where maybe looking back and not with regret, but just from observation, where you could have set boundaries in a different way, you could have allocated time differently, and had a better outcome?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a great, great question. And I think I'm actually answer this question for you, Dana. Yeah. Um, My challenge has been because of my entrepreneur tendencies. Um, I am quick to get something started and get rolling. And then if I see an opportunity, I'll go after it. And if I was to go back, I would say, once again, I would slow that down a little bit. I'd turn down the volume and probably make sure that what I was my main focus, my main business that was really the the primer of everything that was going on around it. I would have been more focused on making sure that was more stable before I stepped out and diverted my attention to something else. Because that has happened to me a couple times in my career where I didn't have boundaries. I didn't say, okay, I have to make sure this is absolutely working before I go over here and do that. And that's probably where I was a little quick to jump ship. And then all of a sudden, not only did my main contracting business suffer, because now all of a sudden I'm over here and I have to worry about the cabinet shop. I have to worry about the electrical company. I have to worry about the development. I have to worry about these other things. That would be my advice I would give to my younger self. Slow it down a little bit. Don't be in such a rush. Focus on what you've got and make it great. I have a client right now who, when I first met him and started talking about what he was doing, man, it was like looking in the mirror, right? He's a contractor, and all of a sudden he wants to do this, he wants to do that, he wants to do that. And so as he asked me to help him, the first thing I did is I really got into understand his business, and I was able to share with him that story and that experience I had, and say, look, let's focus on this. Let's focus on the main thing. And you can be super successful and super happy and make a lot of money just doing one thing. You don't have to cast your net over here and cast your net over here. So I helped him, focus on that. And we set a couple of these other projects aside. And so, yeah, I think those are the boundaries I would, I would refer to in answering your question is, sometimes entrepreneurs have a tendency to jump ship a little early. And sometimes it's really great to focus on one thing, build momentum, and make sure that thing's rock solid before you start looking at other stuff.
That's fantastic, and that's gonna lead to my next question is I hear stories, of people where now if someone isn't in a relationship and they're just 100% focused on their business, that's amazing, right? They're going 80 hours a week, that's what they wanna do, there's nothing else going on, but most people that I run into, they're married or they have a partner and they have kids, and so where do you see that boundary, in terms of those 2 platforms? Because I've seen people that are rock stars at work, but then they come home and they're siphoning more from their personal life than is healthy maybe,
Yeah.
and so their marriage is suffering, their relationship with their children is suffering, and then they start suffering at work because they know the relationships are suffering.
Hmm.
And it goes vice versa too. It's just like they can be it just how somebody functions at work impacts how they experience their home relationships, and how they experience their home relationships impacts how they function at work, and it feeds back and forth. And when people don't know how to set those healthy boundaries, sometimes one brings the other down. What has been your experience with
Yeah.
those types of different platforms and boundaries?
That's a great topic. I love talking about this actually. And it's life balance, right? But years and years ago, I had two experiences that really pointed me in the direction where I've gone. One is I read a book years ago, and they talked about how the American way is you build your business, you build, you work, you retire. Either you retire from your job or you exit or whatever it is, and then you go enjoy life. And they pointed out and made it very clear that that is such a a broken model, because what happens with your health if you don't have health when you get to that age? What if you don't have an exit? What if you lose your spouse? What if your kids aren't around by the time you want to enjoy life? And so the book talked about focusing on life at the moment and enjoying life at the moment and not waiting to enjoy life later. So that had a big impact on me. And then I was at a seminar, a leadership seminar, actually in Virginia. I was at a Ritz Carlton, and we were in a group setting, and the presenter asked this question. He said, "Do you live to work or do you work to live?" And that resonated with me, and I'd think about it for a minute. But I am absolutely a work to live kind of guy, and so for me, it seems like it's been easy for me to prioritize time away from work. I mean, there was times, for example, when I would just work 4 days a week because I knew that I wanted that 3-day weekend every week, and I did it. And it's amazing how you know, the company and your business will work around that. If you set that boundary and say, "Hey, by the way, I'm off every Friday, don't call me," the business can do that. Like the business kind of evolves to be that way. If you tell your business, "Hey, I'm going to Hawaii for a week and I'm going to do it every 6 months," you know what? It works. It happens, right? And so for me, it was very important. I coached my kids in sports. I never missed games. I took weekends. We went up to the cabin. We went to Lake Powell. I mean, I focused. My life balance was really good at the time, and that's because I just set that boundary, like you're talking about, and said,
Mhm.
"This is how it's going to be." And if you set it from the beginning, nothing changes. I think a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of business owners feel like they need to be the hardest working person in the room. They need
Mhm.
to be the first one there, the last one to leave. They got to work 7 days a week because they have to prove a point to their employees that, try and keep up. You know what? If that works for you, it works for you, but that's not who I was. So I built my business around, hey, I'm building this, I'm going to work as hard as you guys are. But quite honestly, Dana, I can get more done in 4 hours in my office than some people get done in 2 or 3 days. Because, man, when I sit at that desk, I am hammered down, I focus, I close my door, don't bother me, but that's just how I'm programmed. So I think the boundaries are super important. I think for young entrepreneurs, well, anyone in this stage, you make that commitment and you set that boundary, and I guarantee your business will work around it, and even your customers will figure it out. Your customers will figure it out, right? They know, but once you open up the door to them calling you at 2 in the morning or calling you on Saturday or calling you on Sunday, once you open that door, it's hard to close it.
Yep.
But once you establish it up front and say, "Look, I am here for you. If the house is on fire, call me." But if you wake up in the middle of the night and you're like, "Oh, geez, I don't think the paint color's right." You know what? We'll figure that out in the morning. I'm not going to answer your call. So, so those boundaries are important, super important, especially with life balance. I'm a huge fan of life balance. Remember the old days, Dana, when we do that life balance wheel, right?
Mhm.
I
Yep.
mean, that's old school. And I talk to a lot of guys who are coaching and mentoring like I do, and they think that is just so antiquated. I'm like, are you kidding? I get that thing out. Like I'm like, let's sit down, let's do our life balance. And it's telling, right? It's like you do the wheel, you measure yourself. All of a sudden you have a flat tire on this side. Well, great. You've identified it. Let's set some goals. Let's just do some things to fix it. I think that's an exercise that everyone should do regularly because it's huge.
Well, what you're describing, and I'll wrap us up here because we're about out of time, and I want
Mm.
people to be able to get access to you. But what I hear you describing is the recipe for the long game. You know, people can go just like crazy and not be balanced. Yeah, they'll look great for a while until they don't.
Mhm.
Until they're on my couch because I'm a psychotherapist, right?
Oh, there you go. Yeah. Yeah.
So, and I'm not making stuff up. They're on my couch on FMLA because they're having panic attacks.
Mhm.
And I hear all the backstory. I hear they get to because it's safe for them to be honest. It's confidential and it's safe. And so I'm hearing all the backstories of what it's really like in their life. And yeah, they might look like a rock star for a while, but if they don't have the boundaries, if they don't have the balance, then it's not gonna that's not the long game. So what I'm hearing you describe is if you wanna play the long game, you wanna be around here 5, 10, 15, 20 more years doing what you love, then you better set the boundaries and you better have some balance if you wanna
Absolutely.
play the long game. So Chris,
Absolutely.
this is amazing. I know that my listeners and viewers are gonna want to be able to access you. Where do they go? What is there a website or is there a link or we'll put this in the show notes.
So we have this fancy new website on the interweb. Maybe you've heard of it, the interweb. I think it's going to stick around for a while. Um, um, bootstrapsandbattlescars.com. That's my whole platform, bootstraps and battle scars. I'm easy to get a hold of. Love to talk to people. I do a little podcast I just started here a few months ago, so there's links to that on there. But yeah, bootstrapsandbattlescars.com.
Fabulous. Chris, I feel like we could have probably talked easily another 30 minutes of really kind of digging into different areas of your life. I appreciate you coming and spending your time with me and sharing your wisdom and your experiences and your life journey with me and with my listeners. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Dana.
Now, guys, I know you have heard multiple things today that you're thinking, wow, I know my best friend needs to hear what Chris had to say. I have a coworker, I have a family member that needs to hear what Chris says. So take this podcast episode, copy and paste it, send it in text, send it in your email, put it on your favorite social media sites so we can build our Phoenix and Flame community and let people know you are not alone. I hope the rest of your day is fantastic. I'm Dana on Phoenix and Flame.